Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Bonachari Yamunatira Bonachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila 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 Prabhupada ki jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivakacharya Astradata Sata Srimad Abhay Charanar Vinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrakacharya Astradadasadasi Srimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinata Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Gita Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavandam Ki Jai. Shri Mayapurdam Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtana Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Readings from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 16, verse number 18. Right? Yeah. Okay. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaudavani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paska Chadesha Tadine Tvata Sanatano Dharmo Tvata Sanatano Dharmo Rakshate Tanubhistava Rakshate Tanubhistava Dharmasya Paramoguyo Dharmasya Paramoguyo Nirvikaro Bhavanmata Nirvikaro Bhavanmata. Someone else? Swata Sanatano Dharmo Rakshate Tanubhistava Dharmasya Paramoguyo Nirvikaro Bhavanmata. Somebody else? Tvata Sanatano Dharmo Rakshate Tanubhistava Dharmasya Paramoguyo Nirvikaro Bhavanmata. Tvata Sanatano Dharmo Rakshate Tanubhistava Dharmasya Paramaguyo Nirvikaro Bhavanmata. Ladies. Tvata Sanatano Dharmo Rakshate Tanubhistava Dharmasya Paramoguyo Nirvikaro Bhavanmata. Tvata Sanatana Dharmo Rakshate Tanubhistava Dharmasya Paramoguyo Nirvikaro Bhavanmata. Tvata Sanatana Dharmo no Rakshate Tanubhistava Dharmasya Paramoguyo Nirvikaro Bhavanmata. Tatvata from you. Sanatana eternal. Dharma occupation. Rakshate is protected. Tanubi by multi-manifestations. Tava, your, Dharmasya, of religious principles, Parama, the supreme, Guya, objective, Nirvikara, unchangeable, Bhavan, you, Mataha, in our opinion. Translation: you are the source of the eternal occupation of all living entities, and by your multi-manifestations of personalities of Godhead, you have always protected religion. You are the supreme objective of religious principles, and in our opinion, you are inexhaustible and unchangeable eternally. Please repeat. You are the source of the eternal occupation of all living entities, and by your multi-manifestations of personalities of Godhead, you have always protected religion. You are the supreme objective of religious principles, and in our opinion, you are inexhaustible and unchangeable eternally. Purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The statement in this verse, Dharmasya Paramo Guya, refers to the most confidential part of all religious principles. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. The conclusion of Lord Krishna in his advice to Arjuna is, give up all other religious engagement and just surrender unto me. This is the most confidential knowledge in executing religious principles. In the Bhagavatam also it is stated that if one does not become Krishna conscious after very rigidly executing one's specified religious duties, all their labor in following so-called religious principles is simply a waste of time. Here also, the sages confirm the statement that the Supreme Lord, not the demigods, is the ultimate goal of all religious principles. There are many foolish propagandists who say that worship of the demigods is also a way to reach the supreme goal. But in the authorized statements of Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, this is not accepted. Bhagavad Gita says that one who worships a particular demigod can reach the demigod's planet, but one who worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead can enter into Vaikuntha. Some propagandists say that regardless of what one does, they will ultimately reach the supreme abode of the Personality of Godhead, but this is not valid. The Lord is eternal, the Lord's servitor is eternal, and the Lord's abode is also eternal. They are all described here as sanatana, or eternal. The result of devotional service, therefore, is not temporary, as is the achievement of heavenly planets by worshiping the demigods. The sages wanted to stress that although the Lord, out of his causeless mercy, says that he worships the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, actually the Lord is worshipable not only by the Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, but also by the demigods. So in this verse, the four boy sages, the Kumaras, are continuing to glorify the Lord after he has taken full responsibility for the offenses of his servant gatekeepers, Jaya and Vijaya, for not allowing them to enter the gates of Vaikuntha. If you've been following along, it's been a long chapter of that story. And although it is spoken in that context, it's basically a standalone verse that is transcendental to the context. It's the absolute truth in whatever context that's being spoken here. And although in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is explaining what eternal means and what it means to surrender to that eternal. So this is a really big question for many people. In fact, it's something that I always have to remind myself. What does that mean to surrender to Krishna? And a lot of people are wrestling with that in terms of what it means exactly, how and where, and how best to do that. And although it sounds pretty simple when Krishna says, just give up all types of religion and surrender to me, doesn't seem that simple when you're actually trying to do it. Is that a yes? Is that true? Yes. Is that a yes or yes? Yes. It sounds really simple. Just everything I've said, give it up and just surrender. So in this material world, we find that everything is temporary. It comes into being, it stays for some time, it produces some byproducts, it dwindles, and then it vanishes. And that's the law of this material world, whether we are using it as an example for this body, or a fruit tree, or even an organization. It takes birth, it grows, it remains for some time, it creates some byproducts, and then it dwindles and either dies or transforms itself to breathe new life into itself by making it more relevant to the context around it. We see that all the time. We have all kinds of shooting star people and shooting star movements and organizations, and they make it really big somehow, and then, it dwindles and dies because a new thing has happened, or some new insight or new organization has done something more innovative. And Krishna explains here that beyond this temporary realm that is always changing, there's another realm that has an eternal nature, which is called Sanatana. And that literally means eternal. So like everything and everyone in this material world, we all have two natures. One aspect of our nature is always changing. Our minds, our bodies, our circumstances, our life stages, our needs, and so on. You think about yourself in this world, how much is changing. If you think of what you were doing, I don't know if you can think 50 years ago or 20 years ago. I'm thinking of myself as a 20-year-old. What I was thinking and doing at that age is so different than what I'm thinking and doing as a 71-year-old person. So much change to get from there to here. The other aspect of ourselves is that who we truly are is an unchanging spiritual soul. And so despite all these changes happening to our material bodies, there's a part of ourselves that pervades our material bodies that we can call living force or living energy or consciousness, and that's unchanging. It's constant, it's reliable, and it's accessible to us. So the Bhagavatam explains that just as the fruits and flowers of a tree in due course undergo these 6 changes, birth, existence, growth, transformation, dwindling, and then death, the material body, which is obtained by the spirit soul, undergoes similar changes. However, there are no such changes for the spirit soul. One time, the devotees said to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, in almost every lecture, you speak about how we're not these bodies. Could you teach us something else? We think we got the point by now. And then Prabhupada said, no, I keep telling you this again and again in different ways because it's obvious that you have not truly realized this fundamental truth yet. This is not verbatim. I'd have to look up the exact quote, but just in a conversation, it's a summary of what Prabhupada was saying. So you might find, our books are saying in the purports similar things in a different ways, and part of that is we need to hear it, and hear it, and hear it, and hear it, so that we might really understand it more than just theory. It's not enough to understand intellectually that we're not the body. It's not enough to understand the concept. We must actually practice this in our daily lives. And Krishna consciousness is a practical way of being. It's not just a set of beliefs. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Na jayate mriyate va kadachin, nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuya, adonicha shashvato yam purano, na hanyate hanyamane sarire. For the soul, there is never birth nor death, nor having once been does he ever cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, undying, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. And Prabhupada explains how the spirit soul is eternal, being sustainable despite all that's happening with our material bodies. Just like this example of a tree that often stands for many, many years, and its fruits have seasonal changes. And again, in the same way, as spiritual beings, we accept various bodies that undergo 6 transformations, and meanwhile the soul remains permanently the same. The soul is eternal, it's ever existing, but the bodies accepted by the soul, they're always changing. Not only is our current body always changing, but we are always changing our bodies birth after birth. So it's change within a change. It's just, you can't stop it. It's a constant that we have to always consider in life, that change is constantly happening. And there is nothing we can do to stop it. It's just the nature of this world, is that time creates change, and change creates loss. And if you try to hang on yesterday and make yesterday today, you're going to be terribly surprised and terribly disturbed. Nothing is permanent. That's just an absolute about living in this world. And in order to be happy in this world, we have to learn how to surf that. You know, I think it was Bhaktivinoda Thakur said it's, you know, we have to move constantly in the right direction. And you just constant rebalancing of what's going on. So, as has been stated, there are 2 kinds of soul: the supreme soul, also known as the personality of Godhead, and the individual soul, also known as the jiva, or the living entity or living being. There are different ways of talking about it. And in the same way that there are various bodily changes happening to the individual souls, there are different millenniums or creations taking place in the supreme soul, or Krishna or Vishnu. So we have various planets and yugas taking place that follow the same transformation they take, like birth, growth, produce, byproducts, remain for some time, dwindle, and die. It's just how life works in the material world, and there's just nothing we can do to stop that. The material body is perishable, but the soul within the body is eternal. And so Lord Vishnu and the individual souls, us basically, the individual souls, we are part and parcel of the Lord. That means that we are part of God, we are in God, and God is in us. And in Western theology, we would call that panentheism, this notion that we are in God and God is in us, rather than all is God, which would be pantheistic. So Christianity is considered to be panentheism, as is Vaishnavism. That's what we would technically call that. So Lord Vishnu is the chief living being, whereas we, the individual living beings, are part of Lord Vishnu. And all the various grades of body, from the gigantic universal body to the small body of an ant, we are all perishable. But the super soul and the soul within all those types of bodies are equal in quality to the Lord and existing eternally. So this is kind of instructive when we think, well, you know, an ant is just a little teeny body, and so we can mash it or flick it around, or a mosquito. But the reality is the soul has the same size and the same value, no matter what the body distinction is. And sadly, people do relate to the bodies of people, and because of that, they abuse, they destroy, they hurt other living beings, because they don't realize that the soul within has value to the Supreme Lord. So it's explained in this verse that we are described as Sanatana, or eternal, and the Lord is also described as Sanatana, eternal, and we have this intimate relationship with the Lord because we are all qualitatively one with Him. And the whole purpose of Bhagavad Gita is to reawaken our Sanatana Dharma, or eternal occupation. So even though we might be engaged in all kinds of activities in this material world, all these activities become purified when we engage them in the service of the Lord. And this is the whole Bhakti Yoga process, to utilize everything, our mind, our intelligence, our possessions, our talents, our families, everything that we have in the service of the Lord, which means to engage them in the Lord's mission. So sometimes we may think, well, I'm just offering something to the Lord. That's a nice thing, a flower, a leaf, water. Ultimately, we need to be engaging in in the Lord's mission, which means to be part of this mission, to reawaken our forgotten love of God, but also to help others to reawaken their love also. And this is the key principle of bhakti, that we are not satisfied to simply sit alone and cultivate our own Krishna consciousness or God consciousness and enjoy that for ourselves, although there are times when we need to do that. We need times when we can nourish ourselves and then come back to the whole effort, the whole mission. But the reality is that our hearts will only be joyfully satisfied when we can help others also experience this divine love. And for this reason, the Krishna consciousness movement is a community effort. Of course, again, we need a balance of that. Sometimes we do need to have retreats, times alone, times to read, times to take a good nap, and come back replenished to this so-called battlefield between the material energy and trying to bring this incredible process and message to the world. But it's intrinsic to our own happiness, in that we cannot be happy unless we are engaged in some kind of service to relieve human suffering. And that's not just Hare Krishna philosophy. That is a well-known, researched piece of information that all behavioral scientists and psychologists know, that service is the key to happiness, is being able to serve others in meaningful work, engaging in meaningful work. So the Lord is very kind to all living beings because they are his creations. Krishna says, Sarva Yonisho Aham Bija Pradapita. I am the father of all. Of course, there are all types of living entities according to their various karmas, but the Lord said he is the father of all of them, the creator. And this is one reason why we call God a he, because we're thinking in terms of he's the supreme progenitor, the supreme male, the creator. And all of us, regardless of whether you have a female or male body, are female in that sense. We're Prakriti. We are here to be enjoyed by the supreme male, supreme Krishna. So, therefore, the Lord appears in this world to reclaim all of these forgetful, conditioned souls and call them back to their eternal, joyful consciousness so that they can regain their eternal positions in eternal association with him. And the Lord, he comes to this material world, in a temporary world, in many, many different ways, in incarnations, or he sends his confidential servants as his representatives to assist him. And I remember months ago when we were doing and maybe some of you were not there, and when we were studying the incarnation of Lord Braha, and and he's coming out of, it starts as something coming out of Lord Brahma's nose, and then he turns into this enormous thing. And it's such an esoteric thought, thinking of God as appearing in so many ways. But if you really stop and think about our literature, it's really the story of how God's appearing in so many different ways. And it's not just, doesn't stop there, that he appears in so many, like a fish incarnation and a kurma and a half man, half lion, and all these different ways, as Lord Buddha, as the cowherd boy playing a flute in his deity form, and his prasadam, and his holy association, that God is actually appearing all the time, everywhere. And even today, even though we don't have a lot written, we have memories and pastimes that are happening now, Krishna's appearing in this whole leela or pastime of the Hare Krishna movement. There's all kinds of miraculous things going on. They are not yet written, but we are telling the story as we are living it. So Krishna's appearing also here, right now in this temple room as we all sit and lend our ears to hear about Krishna. So this is Sanatana Dharma. It does not refer to any sectarian process of religion. It's the eternal relationship of the eternal living beings with the eternal supreme being, or the Lord. And Sanatana Dharma refers to the eternal occupation of the living entity. And this word Sanatana means that which has neither beginning nor end. So when we speak of Sanatana Dharma, we must take it for granted that it is neither beginning or end. So we use sometimes the word religion to describe what we do, in the sense that the word in Latin, religio, means to relink to the source or relink to the supreme. But typically, the Western notion of religion, it's a bit slightly different than what is explained as Sanatana Dharma. Often in the West, or in the Western mentality, or perhaps in our own minds, religion is understood to be a person's belief system, but a person's belief system may change. Today, I might believe this, then I meet somebody else, I believe something else. And I do think that our faith and our belief system grows and expands and deepens. And but often you'll find people who are all the time changing because they have different perspectives. It's not like it's growing deeper. But Sanatana Dharma refers to that activity that does not change, that doesn't change, even though you may have beliefs that are changing. The essence is the same. So, for instance, the Dharma or the essential quality of water is liquidity, and the essential quality of fire is heat. So in the same way, the essential quality of the eternal soul, that's us, is to serve the eternal source of life. And that eternal source of life is known by many names. Allah, which essentially means also the name that includes all other names, or the all-attractive one, Jehovah, Krishna, Christ, Buddha, and so many other names. In fact, there's at least 1,000 names for Lord Vishnu alone. So the source of all life, who resides in the heart of all living beings, is eternal. This is an eternal truth that is beyond any religious perspective. And I believe that all religions started there, and as they grew and they morphed into what they are today, as brick and mortar churches and mosques and synagogues and stuff, I think that they're coming from this eternal truth that we're speaking about here. And what happens over time, due to our misidentification with our ever-changing material energy, we tend to become absorbed in thinking about and engaging in serving all kinds of temporary goals and desires. That's not to say that it's not all right to have desires and goals and make plans. Prabhupada said we need to live as if this were our last day, but make plans as if we were going to live together. Live forever. Yeah, that's live together and live forever. That also is Freudian slip, and it works too. But also, man proposes, God disposes. Krishna also wants to see what you desire. If you desire Krishna, he will give you the intelligence to come to him. If you desire not Krishna, he'll give you intelligence how to do something else. And so Krishna is also there in some ways driving our chariot and serving our desires. So it's really important to know what one desires, because gradually you, consciously or unconsciously, will manifest those desires by making choices to get you there. So different from a religion that may have some kind of historical start date, like it's understood that Christianity started by the teachings of Jesus Christ. He was sort of the founder, even though he was a Jewish by birth and by tradition. Eventually, because he was reforming Judaism as he saw it then, it has now turned into a religion attributed to him. I'm not sure he came to start a religion particularly. I think that he was probably just trying to give a fresh vision or a renewed getting back to the real thing in a very old religion. Buddha, same thing. He's understood to be the founder of Buddhism, but I'm not sure he actually intended to create a religion. Islam, same thing. Muhammad, I'm not sure he was trying to start Islam, but it has evolved that way. So Sanatana Dharma is different from just the founding of a religious path. It's an eternal activity of the soul, so it really has no beginning and no end, and you can't be limited by some religious boundaries. So even though we might say the Hare Krishna movement was founded by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, and the congregational chanting of the Lord was started by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the 15th century, in fact, they were not starting a new religion. They were pointing us to the eternal nature and activity of the soul, the supreme absolute truth, and the reason they did this was that the tendency of any religious path is that over time it becomes corrupt and watered down. It forgets its way because most human beings are conditioned souls who are very resistant to surrendering to the will of the Supreme Being who's living in their own hearts. In fact, it's an interesting concept that we are simultaneously envious of the Lord, but attracted to the Lord as well. We are so attracted to Krishna. We love prasadam. We love to chant. At the same time, at every moment, we're forgetting, and we are, putting ourselves in the center. And it's just such a weird paradox that our minds are changing all the time, and we might have some inspiration to do sometimes service, but not all the time. We're conditioned souls. That's what it means. So we have this tendency to invent all kinds of reinterpretations or spins on these eternal truths, so that we talk ourselves out of surrendering to the Lord and end up surrendering to our changing bodies and minds. And in this way, we actually sabotage our spiritual progress. So it's just an interesting paradox that I just described. I ponder that all the time, how we could possibly be envious and attracted to Krishna at the same time. But if you're thinking, well, God is in our own heart, and usually we are consulting the Lord in our heart after we've made plenty of boo-boos, instead of consulting before we make a decision to do something. Consult, go within, ask Krishna, pray to Krishna, pray for guidance, consult with, folks who are realized souls, like Srila Prabhupada in his books, and get wisdom there. So the purport of this verse is that there is one universal truth, and that there's one source of all life, one supreme soul, and that is fundamentally an eternal form of wisdom and joy, Satchidananda. And because each of us are a small particle of the supreme transcendental soul who resides within us, we also are eternally beings of wisdom and joy. I use this word joy because bliss is not a word that, it's not a user-friendly word that we're used to using. What is bliss? I'm blissed out. Yeah, I'm blissed out. Okay. But in my view, it more translates in English as joy. Delight, joy, this experience of happiness that is just so deeply satisfying, but also energizing. And we are at core a eternal form of joy and also wisdom. And so all possible knowledge is also within us. If Krishna is in our heart, he's also there. But we don't take access to it because we're covered by our identification with the changing external body and mind. So this is our eternal nature, that when we're situated in our eternal nature, this Satchidananda form, identifying with and taking shelter of that source of life inside us, we also realize this wisdom and joy that is otherwise dormant or covered by the illusory energy. So the whole goal of this bhakti yoga process is to discover and realize that the Supreme Soul residing in the core of our being is our constant companion, and that even when we die, that source of life goes with us. It's not that we leave Krishna behind, he's coming with us. In fact, that's the only personality that we can really rely on, because he's never not with us. We are so part and parcel of him that we can't even separate ourselves from Krishna, except for if we choose to forget who we are. So to be able to trust that truth completely, even in the hour of our death, that we can take shelter of this source of life and ride that into our next destination. It's such a deep source of comfort. Sometimes the Hare Krishna movement is mistaken to be some form of Hinduism, but this isn't really correct understanding. I know that we often tell people that because most people don't know the word Vaishnavism or know what Bhakti Yoga is. But in fact, Krishna consciousness is a Hindu reform movement. It's really a movement to inspire all people of all cultures and all religions and all ethnicities and all social classes to turn within themselves and discover their forgotten relationship with the supreme eternal consciousness. And Prabhupada used to call ISKCON the United Nations of the spiritual world, because he saw this, if people were to embrace this notion that we're all part and parcel of God, that the source of all joy is within us, then we could unite the world. He used to make fun of the United Nations because they do a lot of talking, but nothing really happens there.
And the world is more at war than ever. It doesn't seem to be helping anything. So we call this Krishna consciousness, as the name Krishna simply means the all-attractive one, that personality who attracts or draws all living beings back to God's self. So I'm aware of the time, and I want to give a few minutes to talk a little bit if people have reflections, because I believe that these topics are much more juicy if we have a moment to massage them. But there are these 7 aspects. When we talk about surrender, I want to go back to that because it's such a central piece of this verse, that there are considered to be, I think, 6 aspects of surrender. And when you're thinking, oh, how do I surrender? What are some things I can do? One aspect is to accept everything favorable for the service of the Lord. So what does that mean? So to surrender, it means accepting everything favorable. So this might be as simple as developing friendships with other people who also aspire to develop love for the Lord, having association with people who inspire our Krishna consciousness. So that's favorable. It might mean reading books that inspire us to serve the Lord, or it might mean increase our understanding about how and why it is in our best interest to serve the Lord. It might mean to eat certain foods that raise our consciousness or offer that food to the Lord. So all of that, all of it together, one of that is considered favorable. Finding ways and means to increase our awareness of God inside of us and all around us. Another aspect of surrender is to give up everything unfavorable. So that's the flip side. So if you're embracing all the favorable things, it means you're avoiding things that are not favorable. So that might mean stop doing things that make us forget who we are as parts and parcels, forget that we're actually made of, that we are beings of wisdom and joy, or perhaps avoiding wasting so much time in activities that are not energizing us or inspiring us to serve Krishna and his mission. That might be something unfavorable to avoid. A third aspect of surrender is to have firm conviction that only Krishna can protect us. This is a really helpful awareness, as most of our energy is spent worrying about the future, about trying to defend and protect ourselves, making plans on how we're going to somehow escape the control of the material nature, or even somehow escape death. In the back of our mind, there's a lot of things we do to somehow avoid the awareness that Krishna is ultimately going to protect us as we take shelter of him. So it doesn't mean that we don't endeavor. We do have a responsibility to take care of ourselves, but I'm speaking in an ultimate sense then. If you've done everything you can do to try and care for yourself, eating properly, sleeping as you need, taking care of your basic human needs, and whatever you need to do to sustain your life, and all else fails, well, just like Draupadi, when Duryodhana was pulling her sari, she just said, I've done everything I can do. I take shelter of you, Krishna. And then Krishna, he protected her. So having firm conviction that Krishna will protect us. It may not be the way you're thinking. It may not also be so super comfortable or predictable, but trusting that even if we die in the process, our spiritual self will go on. Krishna will ensure that we are connected with him in another life. Another aspect of surrender is to always accept the Lord as our maintainer. It's very similar to that, what we just talked about, that he's maintaining our food, our air, prasadam, all of that is mercy. We totally take that for granted, that we can walk and talk, and we have eyes to see, and we have ears to hear, and we have water to drink that's clean, and there's so many places that people don't have just the basic needs. And I think it really invites us to be grateful and to give appreciation to the Lord for providing those things. And then finally, the sixth aspect of surrender, just always be conscious that we're not independent in fulfilling our desires. Even though Krishna wants to know what we desire because he's there he will fulfill our desires. Even if you wish you hadn't desired that, sometimes you get what you didn't know that you desired, and then you realize, oh, why did I desire that, you know? So we might have so many plans and ideas of what we want to do, but unless the Lord allows it, we may not be able to realize those plans. And so it's a good habit to think always, when we make a plan or we think we're going to do something, God willing, it will be so, because not a blade of grass moves without Krishna's sanction. And unless Krishna allows it, nothing can happen. So it's always good. I've noticed some elders in different religions will say, well, God willing, that'll happen. You know, and that's really true. I will be alive in the next 5 minutes. God willing, I'll make it down to the Krishna pad. You know, I can make a plan. We go to sleep at night expecting that we're going to wake up in the morning, but it may not happen. It just may not happen. So I'm going to stop there. I have a ton of stuff I could talk about, but I wanted to invite reflections that came up for you as you were listening to this topic. Maybe you have some insights of your own you'd like to share, or a question. This is your moment. Yeah.
The point you made about surrender is being the ultimate purpose of life. We're surrendering anyway, whether we
voluntarily,
whether we choose to surrender, where we focus the surrender, who we're surrendering to. We're surrendering to the modes of nature. We even if we don't know what they are. We're surrendering to our physical urges, to our desires.
True.
There's always surrender.
Yeah.
It's just a choice to surrender in a more profitable way, a way that's going to produce some better outcome ultimately.
True.
Something deserving of our surrender. And you said that also that it's not easy to surrender, even though it's the ultimate thing and it's all what it's about.
Yeah.
It's not easy. But then you made the really nice point at the end that it's not, surrender is not just do that thing. There are items, there are 6 specific articles of surrender that's more to open up and understand about surrender, so that it becomes something which is a process, something you can progress through. You can start at the first one. What things can I accept in my life which I'm not currently accepting, which will help? What things can I maybe give up for Krishna that are not helping? You can start with those kind of things.
Practical, right?
Yeah.
It's a real practical. Thank you for that. Thank you. Anything else?
Just on that point of surrender as well. I think I read in Bhagavad Gita that he said the surrender to Krishna is actually the devotional service. That's the way in which we surrender to Krishna. But to figure out what's the profitable way of doing that, how are we supposed to know which devotional service to do, when we have, like some people might say, this is the best service, but then you want to do a different service, How can you see what's the most profitable way to surrender and who decides?
Oh, that's a good question. Depends on where you're living. It depends on what context you're in. If you're living in a community like Govardhana, you're kind of signing up to be part of this project, right? If you're living outside in a hut somewhere, you might be just doing your thing on making a garden or whatever you're doing out there, right? And then you might have only you to consult because it only affects you. But when you're in a project like some of our Hare Krishna communities, there's a choice that you're making to contribute, just like you would in a family. I don't know how many parents let your kids, when they get to be 25, stay at home and not contribute. I don't know. Some do, but that's just part of life, Then there has to be some way to contribute just to your own survival needs, and the way we do it here is that everybody chips in. They do a little bit here, the cleaning, and we share the load with cooking and cutting vegetable, and everybody has something they contribute to the whole community that benefits us and everybody else. Then you may have an opportunity to nurture and nourish and cultivate something that your heart is drawn to. You have a nature. You may love doing farming, and you may not know that in the beginning. People come in the beginning, they don't know what they like to do. Maybe they want to try everything. I've done all the services, so at some point you may get a chance to do everything and try it out and see what inspires you. And I do think, especially when you're young, you're trying to figure out what's my mission in life inside of the bigger mission. It's really important to figure out what gives you joy, because if who we are constitutionally are joy-filled wise beings,
if it gives you joy, that's probably pointing you in a direction. So you may not have the freedom right away to just do that thing all the time, but gradually, as you have time around the obligations in a community to work on that, like you love to sing, keep doing it. If that gives you joy, it's certainly a main part of the Hare Krishna mission to chant the holy name in congregation, to inspire people to chant. Not everybody can sing. If you can sing and inspire other people in your singing, I'd say that's a pretty good thing to do, but it's not the only thing you can do. You can do a lot of other stuff. So, finding that thing is important. Consulting with people you trust if you're trying to figure stuff out is really helpful. Not necessarily just one person, but, finding out who can answer your question to your satisfaction. That's what a teacher's responsibility is. And if you're not satisfied fully with that answer, well, ask again, and keep asking again, and read the books. And somewhere along the line, if you're patient, the answer will come. And I find it's really helpful to pray for guidance. I don't know, we've had conversations in the Krishna Pad about all this, but, it's really important to pray to Krishna. Well, help me understand. I'm kind of confused here. Give me some guidance and wisdom, and it will come. It always does. And all of a sudden, boing, that's the answer when you least expect it. You'll be sitting absent-mindedly eating a bowl of khichdi, and you're like, oh, there's the answer. And it's like that, yeah. But it's you can't make those answers come necessarily. You just have to wait and be patient, ask, keep asking. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Is that Divyambar? Divyambar, yeah. What? Did you want to say something? Did you have Oh, we might run out of time. We have to stop bang on at breakfast time. Everybody faints if they don't get breakfast, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Mataji, for the class. My question is regarding the body, that we are not this body you were mentioning. And you said the Bhakti Yoga enable us to realize this, that you are not this body. So in what sense it makes him, is how? I just want to know.
Yeah, even though I said all those words, I've kind of given up this notion that I'm not the body. I prefer to think of myself as I am more than my body, because if you step on my foot or I get COVID or sick, I'm completely busted. It's not that I don't feel it. I'm in my body, and my body is super important as a vehicle to practice. But yeah, knowing that I'm identifying with myself as more than that, who am I? I'm Satchidananda, infinite, because I'm part of the Supreme Source, Satchidananda, the Absolute Truth. What? Is there time? We have some time. Yeah.
Well, it's part of the verse, it's a little bit out of context, but there's one word that strikes me. It's when the sages say, in our opinion. Now, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, in a couple of places, he says also, that is my opinion. And in other parts of the Bhagavatam, sages also say it's my opinion. Now, in the material world, everybody's got an opinion.
Yes.
Prabhupada famously used to say, that is my opinion, that is my opinion. How do we understand the legitimacy of saying that is my opinion? Because the word opinion also means that someone else thinks something different. But when we think of Shastra, there is no opinion, it's absolute. How do we understand this word, that is my opinion?
Great question. Yeah, it's worth more than the 30 seconds we have to talk about it. But in my opinion, that what we're talking about is realized knowledge. So you might have a lot of theory going on there, even in the Bhagavatam, that is not very elaborated on. In fact, there's tons and tons of stuff we kind of roll over and we don't go very deeply into to pick it apart to see if it makes sense. And we also have time, place, and circumstance. It's so important for understanding absolute knowledge. And we also have our own experience of it in terms of what's my experience of that. And I've tried that thing, didn't work for me. And so my experience is this or that. And so therefore it's really, really helpful to consult with different people and find your understanding and realization within that, what resonates with you. And honestly, I have the experience that when it is somehow or other realized knowledge, there's a confirmation coming from somewhere that, that's how it is so. It's just, there's no question in my mind that that's the way I can understand that. And you might be working, or I have been working on certain things for years, and then that's how it fits. And so don't be discouraged if you read stuff and you're like, I don't get it, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I don't get it. It looks like everybody else is getting it. It's not like that. It's an ongoing, continuing reading. You can read the same books again and again and get new things. It's an eternal process of learning. You never get there, even if you're a pure devotee. You're always purifying and learning. Okay, we're over time. We have to eat breakfast. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I have a question for you, Lucas.